A performance obligation is going to be a promise. Whenever I'm supplying something to my customer, it's either a good or a service. So basically the current approach of the revenue recognition is going to be this. If this is the contract, the big bubble, performance obligations are little contracts within the contract. So the reason why we don't need to split the contract is because in step 2, either way, I will separate every performance obligation. Now be very careful. When I'm talking about goods and services which are promised, I am basically saying that not only actual goods and services can be promises, but for instance, is a warranty a performance obligation? Is it a promised good or service? Yes, it is. Even though usually it's very rare that we sell warranty separately. Well, I know that we sometimes sell warranty separately, but that's not very common. Is it a performance obligation to promise that I will provide you with loyalty bonuses? Like, you know, like the airlines, they give you these miles, which they promise you that you can, you know, convert it into flight tickets, but at the end of the day you can never. Right? So, look, I'm auditing one of the biggest airlines in Europe, and I understand their frequent flyer program. How is it working? And to be honest, sometimes it's a mess, right? So if you're trying to do it, it's going to be impossible, because whenever you want to buy a ticket, what is going to happen? Oh, I'm sorry, it's a blackout date. And probably the only non-blackout date is 17th of, I don't know, September. All right, now, let's go back over here. So, performance obligations are identified at contract inception and determined based on contractual terms and customary business practices. Okay, hold on for a second. It seems that this is a, what did they say with this sentence? Nothing. This is obvious. No, there is one important element of this, and this is it. You have to find out at the beginning of the contract what are your performance obligations, and everything what is after this is going to be treated as a modification. And you remember how did we treat the modification? Terminate and new contract. If it's this thing, if it's not this thing, oh, at least you remembered it. That's also something, it's worth coming. No, honestly, this is something what's very hard to, you know, because you have to switch your mind. All right, later. Okay? And everything what is non-modification will be a catch-up thing, so it is not going to be an additional performance obligation. But anyhow, there are no exceptions for incidental obligations or marketing incentives. So basically, it means that even if it's something what is a marketing effort, like the airline miles, or if it's an incidental obligation. What is that? Typical warranty, extended warranty. Or what else? Installation service. Or what else? Or right to purchase later at a smaller price. These are all are performance obligations. So performance obligation is a very wide term. A lot of things may be included in them, and the important part that every time that you make a performance obligation, remember this, you make yourself a job. And the reason for that, because the performance obligations are, every transaction must be allocated a transaction price to it. Okay? Now, let's go further. A series of goods or services that are subsequently the same and have the same pattern of transfer is a single performance obligation if criteria is met. Yeah, that's actually, well, the standard doesn't call it this way, but let me put it that way. It's a practical expedient. Can it happen that you have the following performance obligation? I'm doing property management. The property management includes daily cleaning service, and daily, let's say, mail delivery service. You understand what I'm saying? So basically, you get the mail and you know, put the envelopes into the offices. Hold on for a second. How many performance obligations do you have? I mean, legally. 2. How many are you have economically? It's going to be 1. I know that this is a very stupid example, but does it have the same pattern of transfer? Of course, because you clean daily and basically you perform an additional task, which is putting the envelope on the desk. So for logical reasons, of course, you are allowed to bundle these services into one performance obligation if they exactly have the same pattern of transfer. I couldn't come up with a more intelligent example, excuse me for that. Okay, now, so what do we need to do? They don't say that we need to separate the contract, they use another word, but the word means exactly the same. You need to unbundle the contract into little pieces. Okay. Now, as I told you, the performance obligation is a promise, explicit or implicit. What do we mean by implicit? Yeah, customary. So in other words, it is implied, okay? In other words, it is going to be implied. Both of them are going to be fine. Tell me a typical implied or implicit promise in case of trading. In case of trading, what is a typical one?
Return of defective goods.
Huh?
Return of defective.
For instance, yeah, well, return of, not defective because that is usually required by what? By law. I mean, if you sell to orphanage broken things, of course, they can bring it back, right? No, but I'm trying to say that if they don't like it and you take it back, what I just told you, that's also going to be a performance obligation, even if they're not required to do that by the law. Okay? Now,
if the law makes it for a
that's explicit.
That's explicit.
It's like a written contract, right? I know it's not a contract, but it's like a contract because you have to do it. Okay? Right? It's within the contract, basically, because it's implied by the law. So, as I told you, it's contractual terms, customary business practice, and to be honest, legal requirements, of course. Legal requirements. Now, within step 2, we have a 2-step model, right? So this is actually a lot of steps in this standard. How do we going to distinguish if a performance obligation is distinct or not? Now, the first thing what you need to understand is something is going to be distinct if the service is capable of being distinct. Okay, hold on for a second. That's for a second misleading. This is what you have in the standard service. I put there goods or service because even the goods sometimes are bundled. Let me give you a typical example. In some cases, in the printers, you can only install a typical cartridge. All right? Now, if you talk about these very, very high quality and high capacity printers, the cartridges must be made, for customary, you have to customize it very much. Now, for instance, this is also something where I need to think if the products can be used separately or together. I'm not talking about a simple printer, which is a desktop printer, because, of course, for that one, this example is not going to be okay. But for those which are used by architects who are printing these huge pages, sometimes they use very special custom-made printers that the cartridge is also custom-made. Can I use any of them separately? Can I put the cartridge in another printer? No. In this case, no. Right? So in this case, even the goods may be bundled. Right? Okay? But the standard is only saying service. But going back to my question, when can I say that they are distinct? Customer can benefit from the individual good or service on its own. So basically, you can use it on its own. Or the customer can use the good or service with other readily available resource. Hold on, that's not that simple. That's not that simple, because that is going to be the most confusing other. Okay? Can you use a SIM card in a mobile phone? Yeah. What is the SIM card basically embodying? The access to the network, right? Now hold on for a second. Mobile phone, SIM card. If I sell them separately, can I use this SIM card in another mobile? If the mobile phone is locked, can I use it? No. You understand what I'm trying to say over here? So you need to decide if they are one or separate. And actually, in this case, it's not the SIM card which is going to be the question, because that is never locked. What is the locked? The phone, right? If the phone is locked, it cannot be used currently with other readily available SIM cards, then the two are not distinct. They are in one bundle, right? And this is actually a very hard issue where in the telecommunication industry, because what they usually do, I don't know if you have mobile providers over here, but they are make it, I mean, what they imagined how to sell these packages, this is what makes us the biggest problem ever as an auditor or revenue recognition. In telecommunication, it's a nightmare. All very important that the resources must be readily available. What do I mean by readily available? Translated from English to English.
Active market is there.
What you have already,
what you already have, or what you actually, to be honest, what you can have without any delay in a very, very short time. Okay? Now, honestly, that's not really IFRS, but that's LOTI gap. Okay? And the reason I'm saying that because sometimes you might argue that if I don't have it currently, it cannot be distinct. It can be distinct if you can have the thing, what you need to use it with, can be acquired like this. Okay? This is also readily available. Good. Now, why am I doing that? Because if any of these are true, then the performance obligation is distinct, separate. All right? And then you are going to account for the performance obligation separately. Okay, as an accountant, okay, as a lazy accountant, what do you want to do?
Same one contract.
Right? But what is the auditor going to do with you?
Divide and rule.
Okay? And you have to do it one by one. Why? Because maybe they won't have the same pattern. So currently the telecommunication industry is trying to convince us that everything is the same, right? Because after they made all these crazy deals, right? You buy a mobile phone and you get data, and you get voice, and you get SMS. They are actually the same, and then we will say that, no, we don't think so, right? So try to separate those and account for it separately. We will see examples. So that's part number one. Part number two, focus on whether the goods or service is distinct in the context of the contract. The goods or service is highly dependent on, is highly interrelated with, or significantly modifies or customizes other promised goods or services in the contract. You remember my previous example regarding the cartridge? I mean, even if it may be used somewhere else in other parts of the world, in another printer, but I made so many modifications to it that basically, you know, it's not logical to say that they are two different things, then you are going to bundle them. What do I mean by customizing? For instance, if I give you a server, okay, a computer server, sometimes you can just replace it easily. Yeah. What about the server of a bank? It's like impossible, right? So the customization, the hardware, every part of it is going to be just one part. Why? Because changing any part of it, it's almost an impossible stuff, right? Why? Because of, you know, safety reasons, because of confidential information on it, because of huge customization. So you get the idea, right? Okay, this one over here, this is basically going to tell you how much work you are going to have later. Because after you know how many performance obligations you have, you will know how much effort you need to make whenever account for a contract. Okay. Now, let's see the second step, basically. The two-step model to identify distinct performance obligation. Look, so this was the part 1 and part 2. And now let's go to the actual steps. Individually distinct if they are sold separately regularly, or can customer benefit from the goods or service on its own or with other readily available resources. Okay? Now, this one we already told you, right? I already told you this, because this is basically a copy-paste from here. Okay? This one, however, is a very common test. If something is sold regularly separately, then it's going to be what? A separate performance obligation. And in the break, one of you asked me a question that I am going to use as an example. Okay? Let's assume that you are selling a machine, and together with the machine you are also selling installation. All right? Now, are they two separate performance obligations or one? Hold on. Usually they are two. Can you make it to be one performance obligation? Yes. If, hold on, you never sell it separately, there's one more thing. And nobody else is able to do it, right? For instance, it's a very specific machine. You can only service it, right? And therefore, it's going to be a performance obligation together, because there is just no market, right, for the other one. You never sell it separately. I'll tell you a good example of that. Installation of lifts, elevators. Now, if you know that there are not too many elevator providers in the world, right? And what they usually do is they put in their own gadgets in the, it's not the computer, but it's the heart of the elevator. And who can only service it? Them. Do they give any access to other service providers? No. So whenever they install a lift, you have to call them, because nobody is able to deal with their, you understand what I'm saying, right? So basically they love the market. This is exactly what these printers are doing, right? Cartridges, right? But what's the difference between the cartridge and the lift installation? Cartridge can be copied. No, you can copy it, right? But what about the lift installation? You don't want to mess with that, right? You don't want to, you know, that's something that is not fun if it's not working properly. Okay? Now, so that's the first one. And here we have a practical expedient, what I already told. Treat as one performance obligation if they have the same pattern of transfer, right? So, for instance, I keep selling you something and I keep giving you customer service. And it's actually always the same pattern. So as I'm selling the same thing, then actually we are just going to keep them together, because there is no reason to separate them, because even if I separate them, I will end up with exactly the same result, right? Okay. Now, and bundle until distinct. So if you don't have a distinct one, then you keep bundling them, and you keep putting together until they become separate. So, group until bundle of goods or services is distinct. Treat a bundle as a one performance obligation if the goods or services are highly interrelated and the entity provides a significant service to integrate them. Okay? Lift plus programming of the lift. Okay? And bundle is significantly modified or customized to fulfill the contract. Typical situation. If you order a machine line from me, right? You order a machine line from me, and you order it in order to be able to fit it in your building. That's very common, right? That you want me to, you know, do a machinery for your purposes, and you will include it in your building, and I have to do it like that. And that's going to be, at the end, nobody else is going to use it because nobody is going to be able to fit it anywhere. And that's going to be one distinct bundle. Okay. Now, here is a small example, okay? This is actually going to be something where we are going to kill each other regarding the solution. Even me and my colleagues do not understand, do not agree in everything. But I'm trying to tell you my best. How did we come up with the solution that everybody was happy with? An entity enters into a contract to manufacture and install customized equipment and provide maintenance service for a 5-year period. Okay. Installation service include the integration of multiple pieces of equipment at the customer's facility in order for the equipment to operate as a single unit. Okay. Equipment cannot operate without installation. Entity sells equipment and installation services together, does not sell installation separately. What does it mean? So I never go and set up the machines that I didn't sell, right? Actually, you know where we took this example? We took this example from the elevator industry. So in Europe, the elevators are, I don't know, for some reason, they are highly regulated. So if you step into an elevator, you will see 5 steps, at least. Okay? And nobody is willing to take the risk to install another provider's elevator, because if the elevator fails, then it's going to be like a big nightmare. Okay? Now, other vendors can provide the installation services. The maintenance service are sold separately. Oh, what's the difference between the maintenance and the installation? The installation is the first step, right? And then yearly you go and keep checking it. Now, here is the steps, right? Step 1, capable of being distinct. What did I sell? I sell equipment, installation, and maintenance. This is, okay, that one is easy. Now let's see. Can the equipment be alone something which is separately available? Look, goods cannot be used without installation. Okay, until this part, and please put here a little mark there, until this part. It's a bad news. Why am I saying it's a bad news? Because if the sentence doesn't continue, then this asset cannot be, well, it can be an asset, but it's not a separate one. Okay? But customer can obtain installation from other source, which means that good is distinct. If I cannot obtain goods from another supplier, cannot get the installation from another supplier, what is going to be your conclusion? Then it's not going to be distinct, right? So this one, from capable of being distinct, is true. Let's go to the second one. Installation can be provided by multiple vendors, so service is distinct. Why am I saying that? The service is distinct if it is regularly sold separately. Is it sold separately? Yeah, because a lot of people are selling it, so it's capable of being distinct. Maybe it's not going to be distinct, but it's capable of being distinct. And let's see the third one. Service has a distinct function because they are sold separately. So what we need to do, we have to move to step 2. Okay? So everything can be distinct. But let's see if they are really distinct. Let's see the second step. Equipment and installation are highly interrelated, which means that one cannot work without the other. Okay? Now, significant customization is required during the installation. Therefore, good isn't distinct on its own because it must be combined with installation. So, although it can be distinct, it is from the perspective of the contract not going to be distinct. Let's go further. Equipment and installation are not distinct from each other because I'm always selling these two together. So, how much performance obligation may I have? 3. How much do I have? 2. Because the installation and the machine, for me, it's always the same. Right? It's always the same. Right. Now, let's see the third one. Service are not highly interrelated because the maintenance is something what you can do afterwards. So therefore, it is going to be a separate performance obligation. Understand? So there are 2 morals of the story. There are 2 steps. And both steps must be met in order to have distinct performance obligations. Okay? Good. Yeah, go ahead.
Lastly, so the answer will change if there is no significant customization.
Yes, it will. And the reason, but hold on for a second, if there is no significant customization, then the answer will change. Yeah. Because then people may not take your installation service. Hold on for a second. And I think, but this is where we usually kill each other, I think, but not everybody thinks, so that's not clear yet, that if I sell installation separately, then I have how many performance obligation? 2. Well, sorry, 3. This, the service is always. But then I have the machine, installation, and the service. But what is my business model is that this is combined together. Okay?
If it is sold separately and it is distinct, and if it has a standalone price as well, does that make it a separate contract instead of a performance obligation? I'm trying to make a distinction between that. Just not clear.
Go back to the previous lecture. How many things is included in step 1? If the contract exists, when do I need to combine? And how do I deal with modifications? The split up is not there. Why? Because no matter if you take it in your mind as a separate contract or a performance obligation, it's going to be the same at the end of the day. No, you don't have a separate contract because the contract was done on what? At the beginning, but actually you have several performance obligations. So the performance obligation is basically going to tell you that this is what I need to do. Hold on for a second. If I make 3 contracts at a time, entered at the same time, how many contracts do I have? 1. Entered at the same time. I have 1. But how many performance obligations? 1, 2, 3. Hold on. Now I enter into the first contract. It would be very stupid. I buy the machine. Then I'm doing what? I'm entering into another one to make the installation. Okay? No, don't do that because this is not going to work. But you buy the machine and the installation at the same time, and then a lot later you enter into the service, the maintenance. Hold on for a second. I have 1 contract, 2 contracts. How many performance obligations do I have in the first one? 2. How many do I have in the second one? 1. Right? Then this first 2 is going to be bundled together, right? Because of this rule. At the end of the day, you will end up with the same thing? Yes. Right? So you will have 1 contract if they are entered at the same time. But you are going to have 2 contracts if they are entered, well, in a long time frame, right? But at the end of the day, the accounting treatment is going to be same. Does it matter then?
No.
No.
It doesn't matter. So actually what happens in construction industry, we enter into one contract and then the scope changes significantly. That's where the issue arises, that you treat it as a separate contract because then you have a different POC percentage that has...
No, that's going to be the same contract, but a contract modification. Because even if it's legally a separate contract, but you are changing the price or the scope, then it's the same contract but a modification. And since you are doing exactly the same thing, how are you going to treat that? Cumulative catch-up. All right? So that's the logic. No. I totally agree with you that you asked this because, as I told you, this is a mean standard. Small little changes. Okay?
Nasi, and the other thing is that can you use the same logic from the other side, from the customer's perspective?
It doesn't matter. Because this is only dealing with what? Revenue.
No, what I'm saying is, let's say for example, equipment and installation, we say it's bundled together. Then if I'm using percentage of completion method, would change as opposed to equipment and installation being a separate, distinct performance obligation. So that way, let's say for example, installation takes about 6 months.
Okay, I see. And actually, they are separate because you keep selling it separately and they keep buying it separately.
Yeah.
This is what you are telling me. Now, okay, in this case, from the other perspective, it's still going to be combined together because, no, if they are not going to be combined together if you are selling it separately and this is sold separately without any interrelation between the two, because this is going to be point in time, this is going to be over the time. Yeah, but if this is together, then we have to see how are we going to deal with it. Okay? So if this was your question, then that's the answer. I couldn't answer yes or no.
Right. That's precisely what I was trying to understand.
No, there is no yes or no answer to this. Okay, now let's see the next one. That's actually a pretty common situation. Customer option for additional goods or services. Let's see what is the rule. It's actually very common and it's very hard to treat. Option to purchase additional services or goods represent a separate performance obligation if they provide a customer with material right. Hold on for a second. Tell me a typical situation where you provide a material right. When you can buy the next bunch for a materially reduced price. So that is going to be another performance obligation. Guys, I guess you already have this kind of experience, that you sell the first 100 for 100, then you sell the next 100 for, I don't know, 95, and then you sell the rest. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now that's a different performance obligation. Now let's see how are we going to treat that. This one was not included in the current revenue recognition standard, so everybody was doing something else. Okay? So let's see how are we going to deal with this. Revenue is recognized when the future goods and services are transferred or when the option expires. What does it mean? I have to wait until everything is played out. Not really. I will show you what is the rule. However, you need to take